IVM.
Hi everybody, just wanted to ask everyone for a quick favor. We're running a brand survey right now and would really appreciate it if you could let us know what you think about the advertising on IVM. Go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and do let us know. As part of this, we'll be selecting 10 random participants and sending them some IVM swag, so do fill out those surveys.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of All Things Policy podcast. I'm your host Apurva Kumar. A conventional trajectory of any country which has made huge strides in economic development, growth, or prosperity has been to put maximum number of people in productive sectors like manufacturing or services as compared to low productive sectors like agriculture. This is the template which all big countries, all countries that have seen stupendous rise in economic growth. This is the trajectory that they have followed. The success of East Asian tiger economies that we speak about quite often also lies in the fact that first they made their agriculture quite productive by spending on agriculture for decades, and with increase in incomes in agriculture sector and with the help of conducive industrial policies, people in vast numbers moved out from agriculture and entered manufacturing jobs. And within manufacturing sector, the sort of the evolution was low-end manufacturing products. Then they moved to high-end manufacturing products, and finally into electronics, and then to services sector. So that is a classic trajectory. That was a classic trajectory for East Asian tiger economies. A few episodes ago, we spoke about Bangladesh and as to how it changed its industrial policies and has now become the garment factory of the world. In India, however, in the past 2 years, and especially after the pandemic and subsequent lockdowns, a reverse trend is being observed. Something quite unprecedented is happening. According to the latest analysis of CMIE, which is the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, there has been a reverse migration of labor from the factories to the farms. This essentially means that due to economic slowdown, the factories have shut down, and with shrinking of the MSME sector and other manufacturing sector in general, people who were employed there have moved back to their villages to work as farmers. But before we delve into the details, if you are interested in topics such as these and others in general, like public policy, economics, economic reasoning, then do sign up for the Graduate Certificate in Public Policy program at Takshashila that starts from 4th September. The last date to submit your applications is 28th August. Back to the CMIE report. So the article says this, and I quote, "Such a large shift of labor in favor of agriculture cannot be voluntary. It is a sign of distress in the labor market where non-agricultural sectors are unable to provide employment and labor is forced to shift to agriculture. The forced or at least involuntary nature of this migration is evident from the wages data provided by the PLFS, which is the Periodic Labor Force Survey. Salary jobs provide wages of the order of rupees 16,780 per month. Self-employment provides wages of the order of rupees 10,454 per month. These translate into wage rates of rupees 558 per day and rupees 349 per day respectively. In comparison, casual labor, which is the type of employment provided by agriculture, yields much lower wages of the order of rupees 291 per day. Labor would not voluntarily shift to this lowest wage sector unless it had no better option. So this was the analysis. This was an article which was published on the CMI report a few days ago. And this analysis and these statistics look quite worrisome, and it's an area of concern. So to discuss about the trends in this reverse migration of labor from factories to farms, which is quite unusual, I have with me Suman Joshi, who is a program manager at Takshashila. Suman manages the GCPP program. Welcome, Suman.
Thank you, Apurva.
All right, Suman. So before we delve into the details, help us understand the broad picture of what is happening, what the report is all about.
Yeah, before we get into details about what is, because these are very highly contested figures and people tend to spin them or use them to suit their narrative, we need to understand the larger macro picture and break it down from there. Okay, so from the total population, you have what is called the working age population. Okay, now this working age population is defined as anyone above the age of 15. Now, why 15? 15 is quite a big number. 15, we believe, it is believed that at that point, a lot of people are actually getting into the labor force. Okay, world over, the benchmark or the world, a number is about 65% of the population. So we're talking about 65% of total population in a country, which is about 15 years. And from this group, normally 55% of them find some work or so. Okay, but the report mentions that 1 billion people in India are above the age of 15. When compared to the rest of the world, in India, only 43% of these actually look for work. So we are comparing 65% in rest of the world versus 43% here. That's a huge difference. So some part of it, you can say that, yes, 15 to 21 people could be studying. But that number is really minuscule when you compare it to the overall population within the country. Okay? So the crux is that the employment landscape is so bad in the country that people just drop off the workforce, as in they stop looking for work. So, and out of this population, only a very small percentage actually finds work. So, which means even before we have started counting unemployment rates, there is a huge drop off. So that number is gone completely. In addition to that, we are also counting how number of people within the workforce, and then out of this, how many people actually manage to find jobs. So this number is 40% for 400 million. Okay, so out of 1.3 billion, we're talking of 1 billion, which is about 15 years old and could probably look for a job. But out of this 1 billion, only 400 million are actually looking for jobs. Okay, so that is the extremely worrying, extremely despondent state of employment within India. If you look at it just from that, from the large, like a really bird's eye view of the whole thing. And then you can go into how many are within agriculture and services and all that. Would you like to comment on that, Apurva?
Right. So essentially, you are saying that 41% of Indian population, around 40% of Indian population is actually looking for work or in working age population, which translates to around 400 million people, right?
Yes.
And so yeah, and I think the latest interview on India Spend, this interview by Mahesh Vyas, I think they have actually broken this 400 billion into a sector-wise kind of a population involved in these sectors. So according to Mahesh Vyas, out of this 400 million, 150 million are in agriculture, which is still a big proportion of our population. 150 million are in services, and when I say services, these are not like only high-end services. These are like this whole range of services, tourism and other sectors, right? About 90% are 90 million, are in industry, of which only 30 million are manufacturing and 60 million are in construction. So less than 10% of the total number of people who are employed in this country are in manufacturing. Just 10%, right? And this number has fallen over the past couple of years. It's quite a worrisome trend, because what in the past 40, 50, 60 years, or let's say, in past 30 plus years after economic liberalization, the idea was that a big proportion of people will be lifted from low productive jobs, areas or sectors like agriculture, and they will be put into productive, more reasonably productive sectors like manufacturing and services. But
Yeah.
that has not happened. And the reverse migration that we are talking about is actually reversing what we have gained in the past 3 decades, which means that
Yeah.
people are moving from manufacturing, from those factory jobs, into agriculture, right? This is what happens. So essentially, this means
Yeah. So the very little gains that we made on or through liberalization, etc., are actually being reversed now, and that is truly worrisome.
yeah, correct. So essentially, this means that, and correct me if I'm wrong. So essentially, this means that a person who is working as, let's say, a security person in a factory, let's say post pandemic, he loses his job, he comes back to the village
Is village.
and
Yeah.
start working in his farm, which is, by the way, not viable, economically viable, because the land holding is very less. So this is what we are talking about, right? Reverse migration. People who have lost their jobs over the past 2 3 years because of a low economic dynamism in our economy, and because of pandemic, they are moving to farm sector. Am I correct to have this kind of a thing?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So the scenario before the pandemic was also as bad. The pandemic has only worsened the employment situation for that sector. So we are seeing huge populations leaving their jobs in the services or manufacturing sectors and moving back to low productivity farming jobs.
Right. So talking about farm jobs and reverse migration into agriculture and into rural sort of setup, is it fair to say that agriculture and rural employment programs like the NREGA, have they acted as a safety cushion to labor who have migrated back to the villages? Because for the past few years, this has been Narega has been an easy target of everything that is wrong in our economy and in our politics. Have they acted as a safety cushion?
See, I think yes, of course, Narega had many flaws. It was criticized for raising wages, the wage level to such an extent that it became unviable, and therefore inflationary pressures and all of that. And also the fact that people were just handed out doles and there was no asset. The aim was asset creation, but you didn't see it prevalent all through everywhere. Okay. But when you look back in terms of the pandemic, um, it seems to have brought the much needed relief within the rural economy as such. So in some sense, yes, it has provided cushion to the labor who have migrated back to villages. But in a sense, it is just another way of giving out because it is a employment guarantee scheme, so it is a way of giving out a unemployment allowance or something like that. So all said and done, it seems to be working. Although everybody had concerns about Narega in normal times, it appears to be the wand or some kind of a magic wand for rural employment at least.
Right. So, Suman, before we go into women employment trends, I just wanted to add here about the definition of work or working age population that this particular piece is talking about. So, this particular article is actually talking about two kinds of surveys. One is the PLFS survey, which is the government run survey. It is called Periodic Labor Force Survey, and the other one is by CMIE, which is the CPHS, which is a Consumer Pyramids Household Survey.
Yeah, I think measurement is, how we measure is important. And also we have to see the differences that both of them will throw up. Irrespective of what way or what measure you take, it appears to be we're all heading towards the same, conclusions.
Right, and I think there's a slight difference between the ways of measuring working age population between the two kinds of survey, PLFS and CPHS survey. So while PLFS consider anyone who was employed even for a month in that year, they consider that person as employed or working. So it's quite relaxed in that sense. The CPHS, on the other hand, has more stringent parameters. That is why you will see that the working age population for PLFS, which is the relaxed survey, is more than the CPHS, which is the more stringent kind of parameter.
Yeah. So the PLFS is a little bit too lenient, and it has got like too much of one-way preference. Like even if you just say I am looking for a job, it counts you within the working age population.
Right. Suman, what are the broad trends in women employment? Are there differences between men and women employment?
Yeah, all reports are pointing to an increase in women's participation in agricultural employment. However, while they are engaged, we have to make a distinction between women being engaged in a particular sector versus being gainfully employed. So, I mean, we know as a rule within this in this country that women do a lot of work. They work in the fields, they work at home, they work elsewhere. So they're practically working 2 or 3 shifts. Okay, so but are they being adequately compensated for this kind of work? That is what defines whether somebody is employed, gainfully employed or not. When you look at wages and stuff like that, it doesn't appear to be so. Okay, so while yes, women are being engaged more, but that could be for a variety of other reasons because of lack of, availability of people or anything. But the wage levels don't seem to show an increase for women. So I'm not really sure whether we should take that as a plus or not. Okay,
That's right.
actually, yeah. So
Yeah.
actually, the lack of investments is, inhibiting. Otherwise, we would have women like we've seen in Bangladesh. The change in industrial policy made women actually go out to work. Right? We don't see that. We are not seeing that push towards women's employment within in India.
That's right. I think you've made a valid point. And while you were talking about the work, about the household work of women and other aspects, I couldn't stop. But I recall the paper by last year published by Professor Ashwini Deshpande from Ashoka University, and she and her team, they have measured the number of household hours that have gone up for women. So they are doing more household job and work than men, after the pandemic and after the lockdown, and they are not compensated. They are not, they are not paid for that work, which is quite unjustified. So moving to the last section of our conversation, Suman, what are the policies or what are the interventions that we can have to reverse this trend, this trend of reverse migration, which is quite worrisome?
Yeah, it seems to be that large scale manufacturing is the only way out. It's your magic bullet kind of thing. But the government is doing, the production linked incentive scheme or anything of that sort is not doing much to increase large scale manufacturing, is not giving the boost to that sector. So, really, I think it is about creating an environment where the industry or large scale manufacturing feels safe and sees returns in manufacturing. And there should be enough stress on the MSME also. So that is, I think, that is the ticket out of this. So would you want to stress a little bit on the MSME bit?
Yeah, so I think what has happened in the past 2 years, and also MSME was having a tough. MSME sectors were having a tough time before pandemic, after 2016, the demonetization policy and all those economic shocks. So MSMEs were under a lot of stress. So what is needed is huge investments in the MSME sectors. This is also recommendations given by several reports and policy reports that have come on the past few months. And not only MSME sectors, large scale manufacturing sector, big push needs to be given in terms of spending in these sectors, because it is these manufacturing sectors and MSME sectors that employ they are the biggest employers. So they employ a big chunk of our working age population. So a large, sum of investments are needed in those sectors. The second aspect is strengthening rural employment programs, and this is something that we began our conversation with. So
Yeah,
we
I think
should.
because any of this large scale manufacturing or investment in MSMEs is medium term. Like investments will take some time to actually materialize and stuff like that. So in the interim, you still need the rural employment guarantee programs.
Right. And also making sure that the welfare through these employment guarantee program reaches the beneficiaries without any leakages, because one of the common complaints of these
Yeah,
programs are the leakages.
yeah,
That's right.
that is always a challenge, right?
That's right. That's right. Also, I was reading the State of Working India report by Azim Premji University, and they have recommended that a huge investment, and there should be a policy push for an urban job employment program, which I thought was very interesting, because they said that most of these laborers who were migrating back, or people who sort of migrated to villages, this could have been stopped had we
We
if
had
there
a
was an urban job employment, a robust urban job employment program. So if they're losing their factory jobs, or other jobs, there is a government funded employment program in the cities, in the towns, and they don't have to migrate back to the villages. So I
yeah.
thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, I think whether we like it or not, I mean, we might have a very rosy picture about rural economy, rural life, etc. But the drivers for growth is migration to cities. So, yeah, so urban job employment programs are really the way to go.
That's right, Suman. All right. So on that note, I thought that this was a good food for thought, and also a trend that is quite unprecedented. It's high time that our policymakers should sort of think about it and come up with some policy solutions. Thank you very much, Suman, for joining,
Thanks, Apurva.
and thank you, listeners, for listening to this episode. And we will see you in the next episode. Thank you.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, if you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Speakeasy, get a glimpse into the startup world, uncover interesting revelations about gaming and healthcare with Vishal Gondal, founder and CEO of Goki, and also host of the Vishal Gondal podcast on the IVM network. On Aapka Paisa Vaisa, Vikram Shah teaches us how to invest internationally. Aiming for a spot at the Oscars, musician Sahil Bhargav introduces us to his world of animated storytelling on storytellers and storysellers. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav has started a new series, The Kashmir Diaries. Here we meet the last rosewater maker of Srinagar. And on The Fighting Goat, the hosts estimate the amount of money spent overall in MMA sports. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any other show for that matter, please do tell a friend. That's really helpful for us. And finally, we'd like to thank the sponsors on the network this week, Siet Cred, Bank of Baroda, Intuit India, and CoinSwitch Kuber. We really do appreciate the support.
From uncensored and unfiltered chats with the who's who of the entertainment industry, I, Siddharth Kannan, bring you a very hardcore chat show called Candid Kannan. Tune in every Friday on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you get your podcasts.